Shalom, Kal Halal Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Wakakwadash, and double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. The inspiration for this particular lesson, it comes after reviewing this snippet that I have queued up for you. But why is that? Because for those of us who are of the hopeful elect of the household of Israel, this is what deliverance is going to look like for us. Immediately, Revelation, the 11th chapter, and the 12th verse came to mind, right? But specifically, something I want to delve into this morning is Revelation, the 11th chapter through the 13th verse. And bear with me, Baba Kusha, because I have my sword out in front of me, and I have to turn to various precepts, and I'll have to do a little bit of toggling with Google too as well, because the scriptures tells us to prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. Let's start here in Revelation, the 11th chapter and the 11th verse on down. And it tells us this. And this is also how you can easily disprove any modern day Christian that believes the one they call Jesus. Well, let me say this too as well, while it's on the forefront of my mind to say his name is Yahweh Shai. But this is how you can disprove any Christian that believes that the one that they ignorantly call Jesus is coming back to save and deliver everyone. Let's start at verse 11 and read on down. Revelation chapter 11, verse 11, and it reads, "And after 3 days and a half," just that portion of that precept there, that's worthy of an entire separate lesson by itself. But what does the scriptures mean by after 3 days and a half? Well, prophetically, that's dealing with a 350-year time span, starting from 1619 to 1969. And why is that? Well, let me come out of this very quickly. We'll come back to that scripture, because in 1619, that's when the first slave ship arrived here to the Americas, aka Babylon the Great. All right. Now, just as a brief overview, it tells us this. The first ship carrying enslaved Africans arrived at Old Point Comfort on August 25th, 1619. An English privateer ship captured them from a Spanish slave ship. The privateer traded enslaved Africans, aka Israelites, to English colonists in Virginia for food. Let me add this too as well. There's all sorts of artifacts that substantiate that those enslaved Africans were Israelites. Okay, you can look more into that in your own time as well. But something that it mentions here is they traded them in Virginia for food. Well, that's another prophecy coming to pass. And what prophecy is that? Well, the prophecy that's written in Joel chapter 3, verse 3, and it reads this: "And they have cast lots for my people, you so-called blacks, Native Americans, and Hispanics. We are the children of Israel." Continuing on, here's the point: "And have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they might drink." Now, let me come out of this here, right? Let's go back to this photo that I have queued up for you. Let me rewind this back and continue to allow it to play. And let me work my way down. Again, starting from verse 11. "And after 3 days and a half," right? That's 350-year time frame from 1619 to 1969. And 1969 is when the truth began to spring forth, okay? "The spirit of life from the Most High entered into them, and they stood on their feet." And what does the scriptures mean by the spirit from the Most High entered into them? Well, that's prophesied to occur in Ezekiel, the 37th chapter. But let me get a few precepts on the spirit of life. And that spirit of life is the correct teachings, all right? That's the correct wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the scriptures. Let me grab a quick precept for you. In 2nd Ezra, chapter 5, verse 22. Listen to what Ezra mentioned in verse 22. "And my soul recovered the spirit of understanding, and I began to talk with the Most High again." And should we be of the elect, that's what we're experiencing now, okay? Through Yahweh Shai. Let me give one more precept too as well. Let me go to 2nd Ezra, the 16th chapter, in the 61st verse. And it tells us this: "He made man and put in his heart," meaning what? His mind, right? "In the midst of the body, and gave them breath and life and understanding." And again, that breath, that life, that understanding is the correct teachings the correct doctrine that's now having us stand on our feet, like it's written in Ezekiel, the 37th chapter. And even that entire chapter is a beautiful read, because those of us who are of the hopeful elect, we're standing on our feet now. We're on the highways and the hedges, preaching and teaching the truth of this gospel, this good news, because that's exactly what it is. All right? Let me continue on. And after 3.5 days, or 350 years, the Spirit from the Most High, the Spirit, as we just went into, is the correct wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, which is going to keep us stable in times to come, entered into them. Enter into who? The hopeful elect, you so-called blacks, Native Americans, Hispanics, that's on the highways and the hedges, preaching this truth in sincerity. Here's a portion of this precept that I like. And great fear fell upon them which saw them. All right? That great fear is falling upon these elites because they don't want us to know this truth of this Bible here. And also it's falling on the 2/3 too as well. This is why you have so many coming up, so many so-called blacks coming against the truth of this Bible, because they're afraid of the truth. All right? Let me continue on. Verse 12 is the point. And they that heard them, pardon me, and they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither. All right? That brings to my mind Matthew, the 24th chapter, in the 30th through the 31st verse. Bear with me, Baba Kushah. Because that great voice that's saying, come up here, that's Yahweh Shai sending his angels to gather his elect from the four corners of the earth, right? Bear with me 1 second, Baba Kushah. 1 second. All right? Matthew, the 24th chapter, right? And it tells us this, the 30th verse, and I'll read on down. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man. Who's the Son of Man? Yahweh Shai. And then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds, which are the UFOs, the chariots of Israel, of heaven, with great power and great glory. Now, let me go back to Revelation, the 11th chapter, in the 12th verse, and read it again. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither. That's when we're going to be beamed up into those chariots. All right? Continuing on. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, aka a UFO, and their enemies beheld them. What does the scriptures mean by their enemies beheld them? We know that you so-called blacks, Native Americans, and Hispanics, you have enemies. Read Psalms, the 83rd chapter. All right? The scriptures tells us that they all have planned crafty counsel against us. Even in 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 7. Let me grab that real quick since I got the Apocrypha out anyway. 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 7. Bear with me 1 second. 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 7. It tells us this, right? And you want to add that to Psalms, the 83rd chapter, right? 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 7. And it tells us this, okay? He said, woe is me, wherefore I was born to see the misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hands of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hands of strangers. Her temple is become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels carried away into captivity. Now the glorious vessels are the people, all right? You so-called blacks, Native Americans, Hispanics. Her infants were slain in the streets, her young men with the sword of the enemy. Here's the point. What nation hath not had part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? You see, you couple that, 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 10, verse 7 on down to verse 10, with Psalms 83. You see, this is what the scriptures mean by they went up into heaven in a chariot, in a UFO, in front of their enemies. Because you have to comprehend that these other nations that have taken us captive, they are our enemies. Continuing on, verse 13, which is a beautiful prophecy. And just excited in the spirit, bear with me. And the same hour there was a great earthquake, and a 10th part of the city fell. And in the earthquake were slain 7,000 men, right? Now let me say this. Remember, the scriptures tells us, just roughly paraphrasing, right, that in 1 hour, America, aka Babylon the Great, is going to be destroyed. That's what the scriptures mean by in that same hour. Now, the great earthquake is going to come from those nuclear missiles hitting America, Babylon the Great, turning into a smoldering lake of fire. The scriptures state and a tenth part of the city fell. That's going into those 10 FEMA zones, which make up America, Babylon the Great. All of this place is going to be destroyed, and you have to understand that. Continuing on, the scriptures tells us it's going to be so many missiles fired off over here. It's going to cause a great earthquake, and we're slaying 7,000 men. That's not a literal 7,000, but that's going into a number of completion, because everyone that's left here is going to be completely destroyed. Let me continue on, right? And it reads, "Were slain 7,000 men." Here's a beautiful point. "And the remnant were affrighted." And what's that remnant? That remnant is what? The elect, that 1/3, that grape of a cluster. Matter of fact, let me grab this. Let me go to Revelation, the 15th chapter, and the first through the second verse, right? Bear with me 1 second. Bear with me 1 second, right? This is Revelation, the 15th chapter, verse 1 and 2. "And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up with the wrath of the Most High." Here's the point. "And I saw, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire." Now, that sea of glass is America, aka Babylon the Great. Due to so many missiles hitting it, it's going to look like a smoldering lake of fire. And them, that's the hopeful elect that's been beamed up into those chariots, looking down at that fire. "And them that had gotten victory over the beast." What's the beast? The 7 heads and the 10 horns. And America is the whore that sits on top of the beast. "And over its image, its system, and over its mark," which is the MOTB, "and over the number of its name, which is 666. That's going into the Chi Psi stigma. "And standing on the sea of glass, having the harps of the Most High." And of course, that chapter 15, it goes on into how they sing the song of Moses, which only the children of Israel can sing the song of Moses. But through the Spirit, we're singing that song right now by teaching the correct doctrine. Let me go back to verse 13, and I'll finish up there, right? And it reads, "The remnant was affrighted," and that remnant is the elect of the house of Israel. Because remember, Matthew chapter 24, verse 30 through 31, the Lord is only going to gather his elect. "And the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the power of heaven." You see? And that's what we all have to understand. Those of us who are of the hopeful elect, those of us who are of the household of faith, this is what deliverance is going to look like for us, okay? And I hope through the Spirit and the power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, this quick lesson has been edifying. Shalom.